2 Odysseys, 2 Twitters, a Twitch. It's ridiculous. It's the multi-stream. It's a whole new age.
So welcome to everyone in chat. Hope you're all doing fine and dandy. 184 of you across those however many channels it is. And of course we're our special guest tonight is Ben.
It's ridiculous.
And so we're going to be delving into some giant stuff from the past. If you haven't seen Ben before, he looks into old newspaper clippings, which is that's something that they can't change, right? And back in the day, newspapers were actually had journalists, right? And journalists actually had journals. They actually went out and talked to people and wrote things in their journals and got stories. So there's a lot of good stuff in the past in all the newspaper records. So welcome, Ben.
Yeah,
say hello to the audience.
Yeah, the papers are great.
That's something
Yeah.
that they
Spent a lot of years inside of them. I know them pretty well now.
Had journalists, right? And journalists actually had microfiche and microfilm and talk to people. I mean, you must. I was thinking about it just before.
Da geht die Sendung los und bei der klappt man aber.
You literally have to
Gehe mal mit einer
go
Deutsch.
through newspapers, or are there ways to search like articles within newspapers, or do you just sit there?
I use all kinds of different, I know them pretty well now, sites and different apps. On my phone, the only one I really use is Library of Congress, because their mobile coding is really good. But a lot of the state-ran archives are horrible on your phone. Like, you can't see everything and you can't zoom in properly. It's just really buggy. But if you're on a desktop, I always recommend using State. About a year and a half ago, I went through every state archive I could get into, because eventually I'm going to do a series where I do a state and do a video on a state and all the things I found. And certain states have different programs, and some are really, really good. Like, you can search very specific, like how many words in between whatever it is you're looking for, if it's just in the title, if dates and times. They're all different, but yeah. Where I do a state. Keyword search is huge. Obviously, that saves me a lot of time.
Yeah, I was going to say it.
And from like a date, and some are really, like you spend enough time, you get pretty efficient at it. But somebody who wants to just use it on their phone casually, I would say Library of Congress is probably one of the best. But if you really want to go deep, you got to just start accessing every state one, because they're all different. Like, I can search a phrase on Library of Congress, and if I go on a state archive and search the same phrase, you're going to get completely different things. So they are different. They don't have a lot of overlap, so it can be a little spotty. So yeah, you got to cross your T's. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. I mean,
yeah, and it's good too. You bring out a lot of stuff that we just don't know. Like, it's hidden history, isn't it? Like, completely. Yes. But it's evidence based. It's factual. You like literally people talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, the way people wrote, especially the news or whatever you want to call it, 150, 200 years ago was very different than it is now. And just due to the sheer size and difficulties of control, and, electronics has made it much easier to control things, and you can have, you have such a thick level of bureaucracy that, just getting a building permit can take years. So you can imagine if you finally get your building permit and then you hit, an ancient ship or a pile of bones. I mean, you're basically screwed. And there's 5 people that you have to call, and then they all have to come out in person. Whereas in the 1800s, farmers were plowing their fields and digging up unbelievable things all the time. I mean, this was a regular occurrence. I use the phrase, we stand on the shoulder of giants all the time, and it's absolutely true. Not just caves, but burials, mounds, people just scattered. In Tennessee, they found a graveyard of dwarfs, and they found over 100,000 bodies.
Whoa.
So I mean, we could go
100,000.
yeah,
What?
100,000.
And so
Yeah.
what happens to all that? Does that just get like turned into fertilizer or something? Like, what do they do with it all?
I always use the Indiana Jones reference, where the
Right, the
artifacts, yeah, that
Smithsonian.
is absolutely from a historical standpoint what was happening.
Then
And
they must have a crap load of stuff.
I mean, it's underground because we're talking endless amounts of square footage would be required to store these artifacts. So I can't imagine it being in an actual building. I'm sure some of it is, and some of it are in museums. I've talked quite lengthy about that I believe the majority of what we call Egypt of the East is a fraud, and in the 1800s, the Smithsonian verbatim was stealing artifacts against the will of the governors of the states and the regions, and were sending them to the East and to museums in Europe.
Wow.
The oldest mummies in the world and the largest quantity of mummies come from North and South America and Mexico. It's not even close. I mean, in Mexico, I have articles where they found tombs in the mountains that had over 1,000 mummies. Same in Colorado, stuff like that all over. And yeah, they're much older and with texts that you would, prescribe to the Egypt as we think of it today, but from America, Egyptian, Assyrian, Coptic, all of these quote different languages of the East. Yeah. And I postulated.
Thank you, Dave's Waffle House too, for your kind donation. Yes, so I mean that's what's coming out. Obviously, Dr. Longo, Old World Florida, is doing a lot of work on this. But so you're saying basically they were finding all these Egyptian-esque artifacts and in America and mummies and things, and then sending them to Egypt, what we call Egypt today, and setting them up as the history there. Basically,
there's been a lot of good videos done by a bunch of different channels that have shown in the early 1900s where they were constructing a lot of these Egyptian monuments that we know today. There were plenty of old tombs and all these things in Egypt. And I'm not saying that all of them are not legit. I'm just saying a lot of what has been propped up as archaeological tourism is a fraud, or at least it's been plastered over, and the true history of it has been manipulated or changed or edited. Whereas in America, and again, why I love the old newspapers, you can really see the breaking ground, so to say, of these finds and what was happening. And the majority of them, 90%, they call them Smithsonian. And again, because of, we're dealing with such a date where, it could take a month or longer to get an agent out there. You didn't have all this bureaucracy lockdown. So you had the people who would find it, and then they would explore it, and then they would charge all their neighbors to come look at it, and they'd be making money off of it until the Smithsonian showed up.